Muy buenas noches.
Very good evening to all of you. I would like to greet my dear friend John Chipman, Chief Executive of the IISS, our Minister of Defense, Juan Carlos Pinzón, his wife, Maria Pilar, Secretary of Foreign Affairs from the United States of Mexico, the Secretary of Finance of the Republic of Philippines, the President of our Senate, all the ministers and officials that are present from the national governments, the Commander of the Southern Command, John Kelly, our dear President of the Inter-American Development Bank, Luis Alberto Moreno, the subsecretaries, vice ministers that are here with us today, all the members of the diplomatic corps, the commanders and generals of our armed forces, and members of the National Police, special guests to each of you, a very warm welcome. There are moments in time when one feels that life is generous. And it's generous because it allows us to draw near to our dearest dreams. Today, dear friends and attendees of this Cartagena Dialogue, today is one of those moments. That's why I would like to thank, before anything else, the initiative and the fortunate shared interest that John Chipman, Director of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, better known as IISS, and our Minister of National Defense, Juan Carlos Pinzón. Thanks to you, John and Juan Carlos, today, in the beautiful city of Cartagena, which I hope you've been able to enjoy, leaders of government, of the private sector, academics, experts, and strategists from almost 30 countries across 4 continents are here to initiate the Cartagena Dialogues, the Trans-Pacific Summit. Much like the Shangri-La Dialogue, the Singapore Dialogue, or the Manama Dialogue in Bahrain, also organized by IISS, have enjoyed worldwide recognition for their contributions to matters of defense. This Cartagena Dialogue is destined to become greatly relevant for the integration and cooperation between either side of the shores of the largest body of water in the world, the Pacific Ocean. Allow me to explain why I feel this meeting represents a dream come true. More than 40 years ago, 24 years ago to be exact, I was Colombia's first Minister of Foreign Trade. And it was my job to lead a policy that opened us to international markets, a policy which today we continue to expand and consolidate. In my case, I was very aware of the relevance of Asian markets and of the little importance that at that time we had given them in our country. That's why in 1993 I organized a trade mission that traveled to several countries, including Japan, Korea, China, and Hong Kong, which began to expand our commercial horizons on that part of the planet. That visit, in addition, helped us to enter, as Colombia, into the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, to which we were admitted the following year in 1994 at the meeting that took place in Kuala Lumpur. We were also admitted a few months later, to the Pacific Basin Economic Council, the ambassador of the United States, which then was the president of industry, we went together to accept that admission to the Pacific Basin Economic Council, which is the business arm of the Cooperation Council. Today, when as president, I have once again led trade and government visits to countries such as Japan, Korea, Singapore, and China, I've been able to confirm to my great satisfaction how the seeds we planted then 20 years ago has come to life. Integrating Colombia with the Asian Pacific region, which concentrates more than half of global GDP and more than half of global trade, has been a dream, almost an obsession, for more than 2 decades. And today, it is a reality and is reinforced through this Trans-Pacific Summit. Why was Colombia chosen as a seat of this dialogue? The first conducted by the IISS in the Western Hemisphere? There are several reasons. First, because this study for centers, this think tank, is a leader in security, conflict, and policy, and Colombia offers a very particular case in these arenas. It has lessons to share and an ongoing peace process with good prospects. The conflict in Palestine and Israel, the one in Nigeria, in Syria, Somalia, the war in Yemen, the one in Congo, the one in southern Sudan, the war against the so-called Islamic State that affects countries such as Libya and Iraq, the difficult situation in the Ukraine, among many other current conflicts. All of these reflect a humanity suspended between extremism and nationalism. They say there are at least 21 ongoing conflicts throughout the world, and of these, only Colombia, as of today, presents a peace process and advanced discussions with rigorous procedures, international support, and a real solution on the horizon, a light in the midst of this darkness. The peace processes taking place in Havana between the national government and the FARC guerrilla to give an end to a conflict that's been going on for over half a century enjoys special characteristics as well. Colombia is perhaps the first country on the planet to undertake a process of this nature while the Rome Statute is in force, which will turn us into a model, a precedent for other situations in which we will seek to give precedence to dialogue over a military solution. Ours is a peace process that focuses on victims, where we seek, through the application of transitional justice, to guarantee their rights, the rights of the victims, and at the same time, achieve peace. As John was saying just now, what is it that we're seeking? A maximum of justice that will allow for peace. It's not easy to find that middle point. Where does one draw the line between justice and peace? Victims usually want more justice, and with good reason. Future victims want more peace, with good reason. They do not want to become victims. But a very particular phenomenon is taking place for the first time also. We proposed that victims go to Havana and meet the negotiating teams face to face, expressing their expectations, their worries, their pain, with a very common sense question. or a very common sense thesis. If we want victims to be at the center of the resolution of this conflict for the first time, and we want to respect their rights, who better than the victims themselves to tell us how they think their rights can be upheld? And the beautiful thing, for me, the surprising thing, a lesson in the fact that the human condition isn't all that bad, is that the victims returned from that often traumatic experience. Can you imagine a victim who faces the person who killed their family, their children, their parents? Well, most of those victims returned with a greater capacity for forgiveness, a greater capacity for reconciliation than the average Colombian citizen. That has filled me with enthusiasm to persevere in seeking out peace. We have to acknowledge, in addition, that we've arrived at this process thanks to the ongoing effort of strengthening and professionalizing the military and the police, which has resulted in successful operations and a weakening of the guerrilla. Said in another way, the strength of our military has allowed us to enter into a process by which today we seek peace. If everything goes well, on that world stage of conflict that I mentioned earlier, Colombia may very soon come bearing great news. The end to the last and oldest conflict in the Western Hemisphere. But security today, and you who are present know it more than anyone, security is more than overcoming an armed conflict or the reduction in rates of crime. Security is, as the ancient Romans said when they invented the concept of the Republic, security is and must be the first law of all. For without it, all other laws are invalidated, for they cannot be enforced. Security is the necessary precondition for exercising rights, and security itself is strengthened when those rights are upheld. That's why this Trans-Pacific Summit will speak of security and of conflicts, as the dialogues held in the Philippines and in Indonesia. But it will also discuss commerce, investment, and social development, because all of this is part of the total concept, the holistic concept of security in modern time with a geopolitical vision. This takes us to the second reason for which Cartagena was chosen as a seat of this dialogue. Our country in recent years has shown an economic and social performance that stands out amongst the region and even at the global level. Our economy has been growing at almost 5%. We have record levels. We enjoy record levels of foreign investment and investment as a percentage of GDP, having arrived at almost 30%, almost an Asian rate. We have managed to control inflation, and in addition, we have created more jobs as a proportion of the economically active population, more than any other country in the region. We have also been fighting an important battle against poverty and inequality. We, as a country, sport embarrassing rates of inequality, but thanks to these policies, 3.6 million Colombians have exited poverty, which means in the last 4 years an almost 10% reduction. And 2 million Colombians have exited extreme poverty in the last 4 years. Progress has been such that our goal is today to absolutely eradicate poverty here in Colombia within a decade, by the year 2025. And how have we achieved all of this? First of all, privileging security. which has attracted foreign investment, strengthened national investment, which is reflected in more jobs. We have been able to maintain economic and tax policies that are responsible, prioritizing social investment and catalyzing internal demand by stimulating sectors that are good for the economy, such as housing and infrastructure. We also owe our good results to the proper insertion of global commerce, which Colombians have access to today. Today, Colombians have access to a market of almost 1.5 million consumers in the United States, Canada, Latin America, the European Union, the countries of the EFTA, and very soon, South Korea. That process that we began at the beginning of the 90s is today bearing fruit, and one of them, perhaps the most promising, is the Pacific Alliance. Colombia, along with Mexico, Peru, and Chile, is a promoter and a founding member of this alliance. And this is the third reason why this summit is being held in our country. I would like to tell John and all of you how this Pacific Alliance was born, because the man who inspired it is present here today. I met Lord Gerald Jones when he was here in Cartagena. He was here with the Prime Minister John Major. It was the first time in the history of Great Britain that a British Prime Minister stood on Latin American soil. Never before had a British Prime Minister been in Latin America. Tristan came with him. We became friends. And years later, in 2011, I met Tristan again in Davos. And he told me, he asked me, why haven't these four countries with the most dynamic economies, Mexico, Chile, Peru, and Colombia, why haven't you thought of joining forces, which in addition, you share the Pacific coast? So I jotted down that idea and I deposited it in my subconscious. Months later, I met with President Alan Garcia of Peru. And I told him, I've got this British friend who mentioned this idea. He's been thinking about it, analyzing it, saying, why don't we come together? And Alan Garcia, who took much more initiative than I did, he took that idea, and next day he was writing letters to the president saying, come to a summit so that we can create this group, to which we gave the name the Pacific Alliance. And from that moment on, Luis Alberto Moreno became an enthusiastic promoter of the idea. So here present today are two of the men who were there to birth this Latin American process, which without a doubt is the most successful in the history of Latin America.
One of perhaps the most important questions that we'll try to answer in this forum is, what lies ahead in cooperation and joint work among the Pacific Alliance and the entire Asia-Pacific region that is represented here? And the answer is, no doubt, that it is immense. These four countries represent 40% of Latin America's GDP, and its joint economies are equal to an economy that is greater than that of India or Brazil. We have an income per capita that is higher than that of Brazil, more consumers. Our integration additionally goes far beyond a mere FTA agreement. It's about a deep integration that seeks to achieve the free movement of goods, services, capitals, and individuals. We are speaking then of a dynamic platform, economic and commercial, that is projected into the world and specifically to the Asia-Pacific region. And for this, it was conceived, and this is why it was created. The alliance has been useful, for example, so that our countries can open diplomatic offices or joint commercial projects in countries of Asia as a group. We have held a first meeting between the Council of Ministers of the Alliance and the foreign ministers of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations to evaluate potential forms of cooperation. So there is no doubt the field for joint work and growth between the Alliance, the Pacific Alliance, and the entire Asia-Pacific Alliance is an excellent subject for debating and discussing at this dialogue. So tomorrow, we will have the foreign ministers of the Alliance here at a panel. Colombia, on its part, with the Alliance as well as individually, is determined to turn its focus to the Pacific because we know that it shifted from being an ocean of future possibilities a long time ago to become an ocean of present opportunities. Over the last 2 years, we have reopened our embassy in Thailand. We have opened consulates in Auckland and Shanghai, and we also opened shared embassies with members of the Alliance in Singapore and Vietnam. And although we have been participating for quite a while in the APEX working groups, Colombia is the only country in the Alliance that is not a full member of this forum. If the moratorium is lifted for the entry of new members, which is what stands in our way, we are among the first in the list, the waiting list, and I hope that next year, when they meet in Peru, this possibility open up to us so that no one from the Alliance be left outside the APEC. At a commercial level, our country has agreements in force for promotion and protection of investment with China and India, and have already signed with South Korea, Japan, and Singapore. Also with Korea, we have our first free trade agreement, the first one with an Asian country. It has been approved by Congress. We are only missing the approval from our Constitutional Court, which I hope will be very soon. With Japan, we are progressing towards an economic partnership agreement today. In fact, they finished their 10th round of negotiations in Bogota. In the future, our main challenge in regards to trade will be to diversify our exports to Asia in sectors that are very attractive, such as agriculture and agro-industry. Colombia has been pointed out by the FAO as one of the 7 countries with the greatest potential for arable land expansion to increase the production of food. And this is vital for a region that every day more has a greater need for food, such as the Asia-Pacific region. So we complement each other wonderfully. Colombia is also a nation that is very rich in biodiversity, and we work both nationally and internationally to combat the effects of this new enemy that every day more has more devastating effects, and it is climate change. At the Rio Earth Summit, we promoted the initiative of establishing Sustainable Development Goals, and we are the first country in the planet that has incorporated them in their National Development Plan, as well as a green growth strategy. So it is a law of the Republic of Colombia. Climate change is also the greatest threat that humanity and Colombia faces. Colombia, the most biodiverse country in the world by square kilometer. This is why it's also one of the most vulnerable countries when facing this threat, and this is why we are determined to contribute to all efforts made to face climate change. So, dear friends, this summit's agenda covers strategic issues such as security and defense, but it includes other very important issues such as trade, investment, cooperation, and social well-being. because all these aspects make up this broad, holistic form of security that is part of the objectives of the IISS and Colombia as well, as the host country for this Cartagena Dialogue. More than 60 years ago, in 1951, Colombia was the only country in Latin America that sent troops to the Korean War, answering to the call made by the United Nations. More than 100 soldiers, Colombian soldiers, lost their lives in the Korean Peninsula, and nearly 450 were wounded. Why? We ask ourselves. Why die so far from homeland? Because there are causes that go beyond national borders, such as freedom and democracy. And since then, Colombia has been committed and dedicated to the Trans-Pacific effort. And today I feel proud, very proud, to see this summit being held in our country that reaffirms Colombia as a point of connection between Latin America and the Asia-Pacific region. Because we want to grow together and progress together. Because we want to forge a humanity that is at peace. Because we want to preserve the legacy of the land and of its seas. Because we know that united, the countries of the Asia-Pacific region with the countries of the America-Pacific region have the possibility of making a difference. It is with immense joy that as someone who is fulfilling a dream of more than 20 years in the making, today I tell you, welcome to this Cartagena Dialogue. Welcome to the Trans-Pacific Summit. Thank you very much.